Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, four nerds by nerds, hanging out with a couple nerds here. I got Nate the Nerdarch as well as James Sutter from Paizo. Paizo? Am I saying that right? I always
Yeah,
mess.
yeah, you totally got it right. Everybody gets it wrong the first time. People always say Paizo or whatever.
First time, Dave.
Our group is horrible because I'm the oldest of them, and even though the other guys are probably a lot smarter than me, they learned a lot of the vocabulary from me. I
Sure.
butcher everything, and so now they butcher it, and now they have because of me they have to suffer the rancor of the internet.
No, it totally happens. Like, especially I feel like people in our hobby, they learn words by reading, right? And so you have all sorts of things. Like, I remember for years, Jason Bullman, the lead designer on Pathfinder, would say necromancer. And everybody was like, what are you even talking about? Like, necromancers, they raise the dead.
I love that. I actually think we should just switch to that.
Yeah.
It's better. What do we get? I get a lot of hate on Tifling.
Oh,
I
yeah.
get a lot of I get a lot of hate on Malay and Kai because I say Kai instead of Key.
Oh.
Which in my youth I even took martial arts, and it was funny because you'd get yelled at by the instructor for yelling Ki. He's like, you're literally just yelling yell in Japanese.
Nice.
So James, you're a prolific writer. You've been with Paizo since the very beginning. Before it was, before Pathfinder, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You guys were doing Dungeon Magazine and Dragon Magazine, which I actually sorely miss those.
Yeah, those were something special. I feel like we, one of the ideas with Pathfinder, the original Adventure Path, was to try and kind of keep that spirit going. But I think Dungeon and Dragon will always be their own thing, just because they were this continuity throughout the ages.
Yeah, I think you probably can't see them, but over my shoulder I have a stack of magazines up on the shelf.
Nice.
From a bygone age. So, but now you guys are working on Starfinder. How long has that project been going?
About a year, actually. Like, the idea had been kicking around for a long time, but it's really only been a year since Eric Mona, the publisher, said, all right, we're gonna do this. Like, now is the time. Let's try and make this go. And so it's been really a race to the finish line. Once we said this is the right time, let's target Gen Con, 2017 as our release date. And we all went, okay, that's, we're going to do this, which immediately turned into, oh God, how are we going to do this? So it's been all hands on deck.
Man, you guys are beasts. That's fast.
It's really fast. And, and there was part of us that said, oh man, maybe we should take an extra year and do this. But it really just seemed like, nah, now's the time. Like, people seem excited. We had a hope that the audience would be ready for it. And then all the reactions we've gotten since the announcement have been that, like, yes, actually, like, the audience is really primed for this. And, we didn't really know. I mean, it was the same thing with Pathfinder, right? Like, whenever we launch something big like this, we don't really know how many people are actually going to come with us on that magical voyage, right? But we got pleasantly surprised with Pathfinder when a ton of the audience came and gave us a shot. And it seems with Starfinder, like, people are really excited to see what we do.
Well, I feel like Pathfinder wasn't that big of a push. I mean, really, you kind of like tweaked what they already knew and offered it back to them. And as gamers, we can be resistant to change at times. So it was probably a good opportunity. Now, I have to confess, I've grown more rules light in my RPGs as I get older.
Oh, fair enough. Me too.
But Starfinder it has me intrigued. I'm definitely curious to see what you guys do with that. And I've been talking to some other publishers, and they've already got products out for your product that's not out yet.
Yeah, exactly, right? People like Frog God just launched their Kickstarter for Starfinder compatible stuff, and a lot of people are planning to get in on that, which is great because, especially with Starfinder, I mean, even Pathfinder, we really enjoy having this big third-party sort of ecosystem where there's just all these products that do a ton of Pathfinder products, but we still can't cover everything. And then especially with Starfinder, because we're trying for a much more sort of limited release schedule, which means that it's going to be that much more important for third-party people to help produce adventures and make monsters and all this other stuff. Just because we can't afford, and we're not sure it's a good idea to try and go as big with Starfinder as we've gone with Pathfinder right at once, right? You know, that it's already a massive investment to do an adventure path and all that stuff. So we're kind of starting small and cautious, and you know, just seeing what happens. Especially since we've got to keep all that Pathfinder stuff going at the same time. You know, we're not cutting anything out to do this, so it's just more layered on top.
Well, between the stuff that I've seen for Starfinder so far and the third party stuff, I'm loving the feel for the art direction. Like it feels
Yeah.
like Frog Gods with their. We just had Zach on the other day, and we were looking at the Kickstarter, and it looks like the art that they're doing is kind of staying in line with the theme that you guys have already set, which I'm really enjoying. It looks fantastic.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. And man, especially looking at the core rulebook, which we just shipped to the printer a couple weeks ago, it's beautiful. You know, I think we were always proud of Pathfinder for the fact that, you know, it was this giant book that was full color, and, you know, and all the subsequent books. Like, I feel like the art has really been something that helped us, you know, rise to the top. But with Starfinder, we're really doubling down, and there's a lot more. Just, it's a beautiful product, like, when you get right down to it, which is important because, as I always say, like, it doesn't matter how good your book is. If it's not pretty, nobody's going to read it and find out if the words were any good. So, you know, the art and Sarah's job really comes first in my mind.
I had already kind of made the joke that I was looking at Amazon at the product releases and the pre-orders, and I was like, they've almost got as much stuff out in pre-release for Starfinder as there is for 5e already out after 3 years.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, everybody takes a different strategy in terms of how much stuff you can put out, and there's always that danger of, if you put out too much, you know, you're going to flood the market. You'll be competing with yourself, and people will just get overwhelmed. You know, that's one of the reasons why we decided to try and ramp back a bit with Starfinder and say, hey, what if we just do a couple of books and an adventure path a year, rather than, you know, we don't have a giant monthly campaign setting line or a monthly player companion line or any of that stuff. Just to kind of give folks a chance to feel like, oh, maybe I can get Starfinder stuff and still get my Pathfinder stuff, or maybe I can collect it all and be, you know, totally up to date. Because I think I mean, we're all nerds. We all have the completionist vibe, you know, or, you know, the desire to know everything. And so I think with Starfinder, that'll be a little bit easier than with Pathfinder.
No, I totally get that. I mean, I spend like $50 on adventure books that I don't use. So
Sure, right?
like Storm King's Thunder, I keep saying, and like I spent like, you know, whatever I spent on Amazon for that, and I've used like a paragraph out of that whole book. But
Sure,
you
yeah.
know, I enjoy getting this stuff, reading it, and like you said, there is that definitely the hoarder collector mentality when it comes to our nerd culture.
Totally, yeah, and I mean that's one of the things that I always really liked about the Adventure Path format, or, you know, Dragon and Dungeon for that matter, is like, even if you never get around to running that adventure, there's still, you know, information in the back, whether it's, you know, gods or new nations or, you know, new rule systems or whatever. There's always kind of something in there that you can stop and read immediately, and enjoy, you know, and that's something we're really going to be pushing even more with the Starfinder Adventure Path, because we don't have as many releases. So Starfinder AP is also going to be where you get a lot of your new rules and like your more setting information and stuff like that.
Like I said, I'm very intrigued. And when I read the first Adventure Path synopsis, I was like, oh, this sounds like a lot of fun. So it looks very
Cool.
exciting. And I guess you already kind of mentioned that you guys had a little trepidation going forward into another genre. And, you know, could this possibly like be a new trend for you guys if Starfinder is successful? Start looking at, you know, to integrate more genres.
Well, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, like, yeah, but on the other hand, it took us what 10 years to go from Pathfinder to Starfinder. So at that rate, ask us in 2027. But no, I mean, honestly, the Starfinder thing has been coming for a long time because we published Worlds, which was a book I wrote for Pathfinder maybe 5 years ago, detailing sort of the solar system for the Pathfinder game and setting. That was really kind of the basis for a lot of this in terms of both the setting for Starfinder is an evolution of that same solar system from Pathfinder that I wrote about in that book, but also Distant Worlds was really our toe in the water to see, okay, do people even want science fiction and fantasy to mix together? Like, are people going to like this, or are they going to go, oh no, that's too weird? And then it turns out, like, it sold out and we had to reprint, which is not a thing that happens a lot with our softcover books. So we went, okay, there's definitely an audience for it. And then we did, James Jacobs, the creative director on Pathfinder, ran an adventure path called Iron Gods for Pathfinder that was very, sword and planet, kind of like barbarians and super technology, and people loved that. So we said, okay, there's definitely a drive for this. So let's see what happens if we put out a whole game about it. But we've been trying since the beginning to get hints of this. I mean, when I wrote back in Pathfinder Adventure Path #3, when I wrote the Gazetteer for Varissia, I remember doing that, and I had put like space elevators in there and things like that. And both James Jacobs and Wes Schneider had to kind of talk me back, like, well, maybe we don't need that much science fiction in here from the beginning. But hey, 10 years later, it turns out some of that's getting in there after all. So,
well, in your defense, there was this guy back in like the 70s. You might have heard of him, Gary Gygax.
yeah.
Started a company, and I believe there was a module called Barrier Peaks.
Exactly, right? Like, it's been there since the beginning, and that's where really all of us, people think of Starfinder maybe as a departure, but actually that's always been in the DNA of fantasy RPGs, and really in all of our experience since the beginning. So this is just a fun chance for us to kind of take the gloves off and go all the way that direction.
What DMG that's come out hasn't had those options in there for futuristic weapons and modern weapons and stuff like that? We've at some point we all want to mix it up. So
yeah,
we got some questions coming in.
Sounds good.
And for some reason I can't get back up to the question I saw, but someone had asked, and I just lost his name because of the way the chat works. He wanted to know if Starfinder is going to be in the SRD the same way Pathfinder is.
In terms of, will we have, will the community be able to use it? Yeah. So in terms of doing a specific website, I'm not sure that I can announce anything at the moment, but it sure would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Like, wink nudge.
I'm sure a certain John Reese is probably like chomping at the bits because he does all the other ones.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I mean, also, and John, we've actually been talking to John since the beginning. And also, we've got the Paizo's got its official Pathfinder SRD where we put all the rules up online. And that's been something that we feel like the community really appreciates and that is really useful for us, frankly, because, between the Pathfinder SRD and like the Pathfinder Wiki, which is a fan-run canon setting wiki, those make our jobs incredibly like more doable. So we really rely on those tools, and we know other people do too. So while I am not promising anything, I think it would be very, very likely.
And that was from Sonic Halo. That's what the question was.
Thank you, Nate. Yeah, for some reason my chat would not go back up. So someone is kind of questioning, can you always use Starfinder stuff for planner ideas or rulings in regular Pathfinder?
So I guess is the question, can you take the setting and adventures and stuff and convert them into Pathfinder?
Yeah, I think that is what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I feel like a lot of this is set, especially the setting information. Um, in the same way that Distant Worlds worked with Pathfinder, I feel like Starfinder can work with Pathfinder as well. You'll just have to change up, how you handle weapons and things like that if you want to. But if you want to take the ideas and just say like, oh well, this is a medieval version of those ideas, yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. Finder. And so I should emphasize they're not the same game. Like the rules are different. A lot of math is different. Like you're not going to be able to just straight up port one into the other. But a goal we really had from the beginning is like we want them to be very, very compatible in terms of if I've got a monster from Pathfinder and I want to use it in Starfinder, like you should be able to pick that up and just sort of use it, convert it on the fly at the table with a minimum effort. Like it should be pretty Starfinder. That's really from sort of our litmus test for is this game properly backward compatible. So there will be other stuff where like there are certainly the classes and whatnot from Pathfinder and Starfinder are all different, right? So you can't necessarily just use a character from one in the other, but it shouldn't be that hard to convert.
Now, the difference between the two systems is the math basically the same, but it's just used differently, or is it that the math has changed from Pathfinder to Starfinder?
The math has actually changed. Like that was one thing that a lot of the design and development folks from the beginning were saying, like, if we want to build this in such a way that it can feel properly compatible, like, because one thought was, hey, well, let's just take the Pathfinder math and let's cross out, longbow and write in laser rifle, and God, wouldn't that be easy? Yeah. And the answer is yes, that would have been easy. And there were many times we wished we'd done that instead. But instead, we built it in such a way that, you can actually still have, knights using longswords in Starfinder. But if you're barbarian, as I keep telling people, like if your barbarian is running down the Starship corridor with an axe, like, and the other guy has an assault rifle and powered armor, like, he's going to get cut down. Like that's not a bug. That's a feature, like, it's important to us to have that degree of verisimilitude. So a lot of the math had to change. The equipment system works kind of differently now, in terms of you're not just having like a longsword all the way through. Like you're kind of upgrading and like getting different weapons a lot, because that's sort of the appeal of a lot of sort of science fiction games, or something like Fallout or whatever. Like the idea of upgrading your gear is something that's really fun, right? And there's some other differences, like we now have
he cut out for me. I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah, he looks frozen.
Yeah. To me, stamina is sort of like almost like shields, where it's like, here's damage you can take that you recover from quickly versus hit point damage where you recover a lot more slowly. So like we've definitely tinkered with some underlying engines. But that said, I think that if you know how to play Pathfinder, you're going to pick up Starfinder and go, oh, I get this, right? Like there are still feats and skills, and you still attack by rolling a d20, and there's still all of these things that are very familiar, but the specific flavors are different. Every class is different. Like the core races are different. You can still play an elf and a dwarf and whatnot, and we give you all those rules in the core rule book, but the focus is really on like, what about playing an android or ratfolk or aliens? There's really a drive to push people toward that stuff.
Now you had cut out a little bit. I guess
sorry,
you had frozen. So it was like you were talking about upgrading the equipment, and then you came back with stamina opposed to hit points.
Oh yeah. I was just trying to lay out some of the differences between the systems. And like with equipment, for instance, that is, I think, the biggest difference is like the damage curves, the way you buy and upgrade equipment. Those things have really changed from where Pathfinder was. So it's kind of a new feel, something that's more upgrade focused. And I mean, it's just a different system. We decided that it would be, the idea was that it would model sort of the science fiction fantasy feel a little bit better than the current Pathfinder system. And frankly, sometimes it's nice as a game designer to try something new, right?
Well, it would be the perfect time to do it. It gives you kind of that freedom of, sure, it's based off of Pathfinder rules, but it's a new game, so you guys can tinker and play a little bit.
Yeah, and we didn't want to just make, I mean, there was a thought early on where, well, what if we just made, like, for like horror adventures, for Pathfinder was a hardcover book that was like, okay, here's how to do horror in Pathfinder. We could have just put out a big book that was, here's how to do science fantasy in Pathfinder, and modeled off of like the technology guide or whatever. And we could have done that, but in the end, we really wanted the freedom of, like, let's play with things. Let's make the best game we can and not be super beholden to how Pathfinder has done everything.
Markham has a question. He wants to know if the math is going to be simpler or is it going to be kind of the same?
In terms of, I mean, the math is complicated, but the math is complicated under the surface, right? Like in the same way that it is in Pathfinder, where, when I talk about the math, I mean, they're figuring out, wanting to make sure that damage scales appropriately over the levels, so that's really all kind of behind the curtain. That shouldn't affect the players. In terms of the actual gameplay, my hope is that the game is simpler, and I think from all indications we've gotten, like, we do a better job in Starfinder's core rulebook of kind of holding and really hopefully making it a better introduction. Because, we learned a lot from doing, we did the Pathfinder core rulebook, and then we did the Pathfinder beginner box as a way
James,
to...
real quick.
Yeah.
See if you can turn down your bandwidth a little bit.
Sure. Let's see. How...
If you move your mouse around, you should get the black bar at the top, which will have your...
Which I see a little control room thing.
Okay.
And it just says that I'm in a moderated video call and that you're in charge.
Oh, so it doesn't give you the option, like you don't have where you can mute your mic or the camera.
I see that up top. Yeah, actually.
Yes,
adjust bandwidth usage. Okay, so turn it back down to like the middle.
Yeah, that might help out for the cutting out.
Okay. How's that? I can turn it down even more if that's...
Well, we'll work with that and see how it goes.
Yeah.
The interwebs, who knows technology? We don't have Starfinder technology yet.
Yeah, I know, right? Here, I'll actually turn it down even a little bit farther just to see what happens. Okay. Oh, geez, what was I? Yeah, so really, I was just saying, we learned a lot from doing the Pathfinder beginner box about how to try and make the game easier to play if you don't have somebody there to teach you. And so I like to think that we've managed to bring a lot of those lessons forward into the Starfinder core rulebook and make the game, it's not suddenly going to be, dread level simple. But it's because it's still based on the Pathfinder rules. But I think it's easier to learn.
So what aspect of Starfinder has you the most excited? Clearly, this seems like this is one of the projects you're kind of pushing for and driven to do. So,
oh yeah, for me, it's all about the setting. Like, that's always with any game system. The setting is what really drives me. It's what pulls me to learn the rules. And so, getting to both do a bunch of new stuff and also revisit, a lot of these planets that I got to invent in distant worlds. Take them and see, well, what are they like in the future? That's just been really fun. And seeing what sort of what factions have survived through thousands of years from Pathfinder to Starfinder. What gods are ascendant and what gods have kind of disappeared. All of that is really exciting to me.
So Hydronaut has a question. Hey, can you give us a brief description of classes and races?
Yeah, sure. So there's 7 of each. 7 new races. Obviously, there are a bunch of other races. So races first, you've got humans. Obviously, you've got Kasatha, which are these 4-armed aliens. You've got Yosoki ratfolk, who are, they are ratfolk, but they're ratfolk from Akaton, this Mars-like planet we've got. You've got androids. Let's see, the lashunta, who are these telepathic humanoids with antennae. Let's see, that's 5. Who am I leaving out? Oh, geez, this is what always happens when I try to list things out. I start just blanking. And then you've got the 2 that I haven't been able to announce until recently. So you got the Vesk, which are these big sort of reptilian lizard kind of folks, and the Shirin, which are bug people. And we just announced the Shirin last week. So those guys actually, if folks want to see art of those, if you check the Paizo blog for the last 2 weeks, we unveiled some really cool images of those guys. Those are the races, and then class-wise, we've got the soldier, which is your straight up like heavy weapons, armor, that sort of thing. The operative, who are your sneaky. You guys look kind of frozen.
I think we should be unfrozen now.
Okay, cool. Then you've got the Solarian, which is this new class that I'm really excited about, that is kind of they basically are attuned to the cycle of the universe in terms of stars, living and dying, becoming black holes. And so they have powers based on sort of the idea of energy and entropy, but they, in any given round, they decide whether they want to attune themselves more one direction or the other. So you can get better at one power by choosing to sort of attune yourself to it, but you get worse at the other power. And you're going back and forth like that during combat as you decide, not just what's best for this round, but what do you want to set up to do several rounds down the line in combat. So that's really kind of allows some fun strategic play. And they also get to make weapons and armor out of stellar energy, or so you can have basically we never use the term lightsaber, but you could have an energy weapon or energy armor or something. And so that's really fun. Let's see, we've got the mechanic, who, depending on which track you choose, you either build a little drone robot buddy, or you have an AI plugged into your head that makes you better at stuff. We've got the envoy, who's sort of a bard-like. They inspire people. They're really kind of, well, they don't have to be the captain. They're really good at, demoralizing enemies and boosting, allies. And then we've got the technomancer, who's basically like computer programmers with magic, where they're hacking hacking physics basically to create these spell effects. And then we've got the mystic, who's more of not necessarily a divine caster. They're channeling sort of the mysterious energies of the universe, often through a god, but they can do it a lot of different ways.
The precept is there. One of the concepts is the gods are gone, right? That was part of.
No. The gods are definitely still there, but Galarian is missing. Like the planet, the planet that Pathfinder is primarily based on is the planet Galarian. And in Starfinder, the planet has just gone missing, and nobody knows where it is. Nobody knows what happens. And there's this period of kind of universe-wide, or at least galaxy-wide amnesia that affects even the gods, where they don't know. It's called the Gap. And it's just this period where history is broken. Like nobody really knows reliably what happened during that period. So there's all sorts of mysterious things from that era that people just don't know what happened. And Galarian Missing is one of them. And not even the gods will tell people where it went.
I kind of love it in the sense that you're like, we don't have to figure it out. It's it's perfect.
Well,
that's a
it's
great story device.
Sorry, say that again.
That's a great story device for. Okay, we don't have to worry about what happened the past couple thousand years because.
Well, yeah, and I think it was very important because we're not ending Pathfinder. Pathfinder is still going, and so one of the things we wanted to make sure of with Starfinder is if we're going to do this in the future of Pathfinder, which we thought seemed really fun, we don't want to invalidate what's going on in Pathfinder right now. We don't want people to be able to get onto space Wikipedia and look up like, did the Whispering Tyrant ever break free? Like what did happen to Eridan? Like we don't want everybody to be able to invalidate their Pathfinder Adventure Path because they played Starfinder. And so that was what really led to the formation of this idea of the gap. But then I just got really interested in the idea of what happens when, an entire culture, an entire society wakes up one morning and has no idea how they got to be where they are. Like amnesia and memory issues are really fascinating. And so this idea of like, you wake up and you know who your wife and children are, but you have no idea when you met your wife, or like you have no memory of your children being born. You know what your job is. You got it. Like these ideas of sort of like having knowledge about the current situation, but not having memory is a really interesting idea to me. And actually, a lot of it's based on when I was younger, I had a girlfriend that got hit by a car and got that amnesia where she just had no, she lost everything, right? Where she didn't know her own name, that kind of thing. And then it started coming back, but the memories never came back. So it was the sort of thing where like, she spoke like 4 languages, but she didn't know what languages she spoke until somebody started talking to her in them. Like that kind of thing just blew my mind. And so the idea of like that as a galaxy-wide sort of catastrophe is really interesting. And then how does culture evolve, right? Because in Starfinder, it's been about 300 years since that happened. So like they're building their own culture. Like they've most people, like the people who lived through that period were really messed up by it. But if you're a kid and born after that, you think like, okay, well, we don't have any history. So what? I've never had history. Like, this idea of going forward. And that was also something that was really a deliberate decision by us because like with Pathfinder, while it's fun to have tens of thousands of years of history, it means that you're so frequently talking about, the interesting stuff that happened in the past. Mm-hmm. And in Starfinder, we really want the interesting stuff to be happening now. We want people to be at the beginning of this sort of land rush out into the galaxy, like faster than light travel is fairly recent, that kind of thing. Because we want people to get to play the big events, not just read about them,
Yeah, and one of the big problems with a history-rich setting is, well, where does that information come from to the players for the most part? From the
exactly.
GM. So then you end up with the GM monologuing through all your sessions instead of the players interacting. There's a couple of pretty good questions.
Yeah.
Hydrant wanted to know about BioWare and cyberware, kind of like a la Shadowrun.
Yeah, it's definitely in there. It's definitely systems that we plan to expand on more in the future, but we thought it was very important to give people cybernetics and BioWare and stuff like that from the beginning.
And then admin asked, what is your scientist character going to be? I mean, is that the technomancer, or can someone else fill that role?
Well, actually, a bunch of people could fill that role. Like that's we also introduced a mechanic called themes to help, which are sort of, if your class is most of your abilities, a theme is like a little extra suite of abilities that you can tack on to any class. So you can be, choose the scholar theme and maybe you put that on the technomancer, but maybe you put that on the soldier, you know, and you're a battle scholar or whatever, like that. Trying to make a lot of versatility so that people can build the same idea with different classes was something we were really pushing for. So while anybody could be that researcher, I'd say off the top of my head, probably technomancer and mechanic worked the best there for sort of a scientist, but you could use basically any class.
Makes sense. What about is there any, Joseph wants to know, is there a charisma caster?
I am now totally blanking. I don't believe so. We've got like, so the, you know, your classic bard is really more filled by the envoy who does it non-magically. And then in terms of, you know, sorcerer style. So one thing I should mention is that both of the spellcaster classes are spontaneous casters. Like there are no currently prepared casters in Starfinder, and that's one of the things where we knew going into this game that we wanted to simplify some elements to make it just a little bit easier to play. So both of the casters, while they have different spell lists and they operate differently and have different class abilities, like the means of spell casting is the same. And for the same reason, we actually removed the arcane divine distinction, where now, you know, magic is just magic. Like it's things that are supernatural that are, you know, not possible using the current laws of physics. So that's just all magic kind of falls into that category because we felt like there was sort of a, I mean, you know, I don't want to say that they didn't have a point because it was, you know, part of the lore and everything, but sometimes there are rules that just are kind of rules for rules' sake, and we really tried to avoid that in Starfinder to try and make it a little bit slimmer, which, you know, granted the book is still, you know, over 500 pages, so slimmer is relative, but we wanted to make it just easier to get into the game. And so a few things like that kind of got smushed together.
So, someone asked, here it is, Sylvain, he wanted to know if the themes are kind of similar to backgrounds in 5e.
So I'm not super familiar with 5e, but I believe it's kind of a similar idea of just like giving you more dials that you can tweak to make your character kind of unique, right? Especially because we have fewer classes in Starfinder than we do in Pathfinder. You know, we've only got 7 classes, and so it was important to us to make sure that it still felt as versatile. And so rather than including a bunch more classes, we thought that putting in themes so that you can say, well, I'm going to take the ace pilot theme, okay, but it's going to be very different if I put that on, a soldier versus a mystic, right? Like, you know, what does a pilot mystic even look like, right? Some sort of Zen pilot, like that's really interesting, you know? So like trying to give people more settings they can play with to get different combinations of characters.
That was my question. I was going to ask about the pilot, who could be one. So you're basically saying the pilot's a theme and you can attach it to any character?
Yeah. Well, so actually the theme is, so anybody can be a pilot, but we've got an ace pilot theme that makes you better at that stuff that you can apply to anybody. And which actually ties in a little bit to, so starships are definitely a part of this game. And there's a whole starship combat and custom starship building section in the core rulebook. Even though the game is primarily about Pathfinder-style on-the-ground adventuring, there's also a pretty robust starship combat system. And one of the things that I like about that is that when you're on a starship, it's not just the captain making all these rolls while the other players kind of sit around. Everybody in starship combat has a different role. So, and you can choose regardless of your class, but you can be a captain or a gunner or a pilot or, a science officer or engineer. There are all these different roles with different tasks that need to be done during combat. So it really makes it a team experience, something more like your classic Star Trek style, everybody on the bridge is doing something, right? And that was really important to us because otherwise we knew like it can get real boring really fast when one character is just stuck in a little mini game, right, and everybody else is waiting. We wanted to make sure that everybody could get in on that.
Now, is that kind of dictated by your theme, or is there other ways for you to interact on, in like ship to ship combat and being part of the?
Yeah, it's definitely not. So you can use class and theme to build a specialist in one of these, categories. If you want to be like, oh, I'm going to build my character to be really good at the piloting role, you can do that, but you're not locked into it. It's not like soldiers are always gunners. It's whoever wants to, whoever wants to customize their character to be good in, the skill that controls that aspect of Starship combat. Anybody can do it. So it might be easier to make a great gunner with a soldier, but you can certainly still do it with a mystic or an envoy or whoever.
Do you have any particular piece that's going into the Starfinder system that you're the most proud of?
Oh God. Well, I mean, so really the setting was where I took a lot of the lead. I mean, so a lot of people worked on it. Obviously, Rob McCreary, our senior developer, he did the gods section, and everybody contributed planets here and there. But the setting was the thing I was most excited about. But in terms of rules wise, I think the thing I'm most proud of is probably actually the introductory stuff right at the front of the book, like the stuff that walks you through character creation, the stuff that teaches you about alignment and ability scores and stuff like that, and even just the examples of play that show you this is what the game is supposed to feel like. Because I feel like I can remember being a kid and not necessarily even having anybody to play with, but you had the old DMG or wherever where they'd have the little sort of scripts of here's what the DM says, and then here's what the player says, and those bits were the things that taught me what the game is supposed to feel like, right? And so I think that's actually hugely important. But after that, I'd probably say the races. The races are also something that I was really hands-on with and really excited about.
Well, I would think with the Starfinder, with being able to delve into aliens, it's definitely a place where you can really stretch your imagination and have some fun. So our roll call is starting to come in. We got Washington, we got Wales, and while I'm waiting for them to sound off where they're from. So
oh, nice.
There's something that so Nightcrawl, I've seen this come up a couple times. How many QA testers are involved or have been? I'm not entirely familiar with the QA part of
I think he means so that's software style, right? How many play testers, how many people are finding bugs and kicking the tires before it goes out. So this time, instead of for Pathfinder, we had a giant, we had a year of the beta and all this play testing with, I think there's maybe even hundreds of thousands of people by the end. For this game, because of the timelines involved and the fact that it was a brand new game rather than an evolution of existing rules, in order to do a public playtest, we would have had to build the entire game, give the public the entire game, and then see how that worked out. So instead, we did a closed playtest where we got a bunch of our, fellow industry people, third-party publishers, high-level, Pathfinder Society organized play people, folks from the industry, and some folks that were outside of it as well, just random folks that we knew had really good rules chops. We got those guys and girls in on the closed playtest. And then we also have, internally, in addition to designers and developers, we also have editors. We had, everybody all through one of the most important things was the day when we sat down with the customer service department and some of the folks from the tech team and said, here's, the stuff to make a character. And then we sat there and watched them do it and realized oh man, there are some problems in here that we were too close to see, And so that was actually Amanda Hammond, one of our developers, really took the lead on that. and came back down and went, guys, we got to redo. These pages are broken. We got to redo this. And so then we rewrote that whole section and did the same thing, gave it back to customer service and those folks and said, and fortunately got it much better the second time. But like you're constantly doing that in a game system like this. So we had, it was definitely the Pathfinder playtest, but we still had a lot of people trying to check us at every stage.
Well, you guys are fortunate because you have a vast network with having, Pathfinder being such an open game that you can literally bring in so many people that are, quote unquote, from the outside to take a look and help you guys out, which is a huge benefit. So we got Edmonds, Washington in the house with Elf Bait. We got Lee Voyer in California, Brian Dodd, Cincinnati, Palamanji, Pittsburgh. We've got Fresno, California with Dominic, Kyle S. Narnia. Nice try. Chad, Waycross, Georgia. We got Quebec, Canada in the house. I can't talk today. Sorry, guys. Tom Harris, Indiana. And I'm sure Jacksonville, Florida. And as I say them, they'll start, weighing in with even more. Ireland, Dublin. Nice. Utah, Illinois, Toronto, Ontario.
Now I'm really impressed by the overseas folks. The folks in the UK. Yeah. It's pretty late over there.
We get them too. Like I always go, where's Sweden and Denmark at? And then they'll pop in and be like, oh, we're here. So,
nice.
It's one of the coolest things about doing these live chats. At some point we always do a roll call to see where people are coming in from, and we get them from all over the world.
Yeah,
I'm still fascinated by that, even though we've done quite a few of these.
Oh no, I mean it's always interesting. I feel like one of the coolest things for me working on Pathfinder is seeing all these people pop up as players from all over the world. The idea that these books have been places that I have never been and probably will never be, that's really interesting. I remember the first time I got an email from somebody living in Istanbul who had just read one of my Pathfinder novels saying, oh, we loved it. And I went, oh my God, that's incredible. Or in a couple of months, I'm going to a convention down in Johannesburg, South Africa. And how would I have ever imagined that writing about dragons would somehow lead me to, being brought down to South Africa? That's just bonkers.
Yeah, it is crazy. We do a monthly giveaway, and we've sent stuff to Australia, UK, Sweden, Bulgaria. Eventually, I guess when you do this and you interact with more and more people, eventually you get places you're like, that's a place.
Yeah, exactly, right.
But it's a lot of fun. Now, we were talking a little bit, before we got going with your other interests. So I think we'll let Starfinder breathe for a second.
Yeah.
And if you want to, is there anything else you want to talk about, like your music or?
Oh God, yeah. Writing? I mean, I'm always working on a bunch of different stuff. I think one of the really fun things right now is I'm writing some of the Pathfinder comics. So I've been doing those for a little while now with Eric Mona and Wes Schneider, publisher and editor-in-chief, respectively. But so we've been writing the Pathfinder comics, and Wes and I have a new series called Rune Scars that launches next month, which is, it's all, because we're allowed to play with all the toys, it's got Hell Knights, and it's set in Corvosa, and there's Rune Lords involved, and it's sort of all of the stuff that at some levels only we who've been around for a long time are allowed to play with. But I'm really excited to be writing that because comics is just so fun. Getting to write a script and then watch an artist bring it to life, page by page, is just decadent. It's as a writer, it's the most satisfying thing to see somebody else doing all this great art based off your words. So I'm doing that, and of course, writing novels and doing video game stuff, and kind of a little bit of everything. It's pretty busy.
It sounds it. So has Starfinder actually inspired any of your musical works, or
You know,
vice
it's
versa?
it's funny. Yeah, I wouldn't say that we've uh, written any straight up Starfinder songs, but there's a lot of crossover actually. Like, I yeah, because one of my band, and for folks who weren't on the call earlier, I've got a band that's a sort of a goofy hair metal band called Brides of the Lizard God. And we definitely, our rule is nothing is too cheesy as long as it's also awesome. So we've got a whole like trilogy of concept songs called the Apostates Rebellion. That's all about, an evil starfaring empire and people, fighting against it and whatnot. And it's goofy, it's fun, So we've got that on one hand, and then we do stuff like very Iron Maiden style dragons and knights and stuff. We've got one song called Power Snake that's all about a giant serpent devouring the countryside. That was inspired by the fact that the other guitarist couldn't remember what you call an extension cord, and so he was like, a power snake, one of those things. We got that is a very Iron Maiden-esque song title. Let's write that, So, but yeah, so you see a lot of Starfinder and Pathfinder in music, I think.
I think there's a golden opportunity that may have been missed in the Starfinder system. You could have just made it so hair metal was the only kind of music that was left.
Well, it's funny. I did actually get I got the chance. We in the settings section of the core rulebook. I was like a paragraph short on one page talking about the culture, and I got to just sort of spontaneously riff on like, well, what is the entertainment in Starfinder, right? Like what do they listen to? Like what do they watch? And so I was inventing just off the cuff, sports like, oh, they play Brutaris, which is this horrible like gladiator style game, and they listen to Absalomian Ibite rock, which is like the arena, the arena rock of, or I was thinking like, oh, I bet that they probably have raves with, if you've got all these AIs that are super intelligent, I bet they could design music that would literally perfect, right? Like perfectly designed to tweak all those parts of your brain that feel things through music. And so like, I bet you could have sort of this like Apollonian, sensate raves or whatever, where the music is just like getting you high all the time, and that's the stuff where some of my favorite setting creation is when I've just got a page to fill and no ideas and a deadline. And so that it's just like, you just stream of consciousness and then you come back to it afterward and go, some of that is really fun.
Awesome. We're about to start doing a game in one of the more generic systems. So I let our patrons kind of vote on the type of game it's going to be. And so far, it's like
it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be steampunk with fantasy elements, fantasy and espionage elements, with a eldritch horror threat in the horizon. So
nice.
But one of the things I was thinking,
mashed together.
Yeah, but one of the things I was thinking is, I was like, you know what? I need to do at least one sporting event that I'm going to make the players come up with during the session 0.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, I feel like art forms and music and sports and whatnot, like, they say so much about a culture, and it's so easy to come up with really weird new ideas, right? That feel very alien, but they make a setting feel cohesive, right? I think, did I lose you guys?
Yeah, momentarily, but you're back.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. So please continue.
So I don't know. I'm following you in the chat at the same time, and the chat can go in strange places. They keep talking about Rick and Morty over there. I don't think that's the Starfinder though.
No, it's funny. Rick and unveiled our insect, or our bug race, the shears. Well, I haven't seen this episode yet. Like Crobopulus Michael, a character that just really loves. And as soon as we announced it, the message thread was flooded with people like, "Oh my God, it's the guy from Rick and Morty!" So apparently, I need to watch that episode.
That's funny. Although you were cutting in and out, I caught like every third word, but I got the gist of it. You guys introduced something that was similar to something from Rick and Morty.
Yeah. Here, let me drop the bandwidth even more. Okay, I'm as low as we can go without turning off the camera.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what the deal is with that. Google.
Yeah, but anywho, yes, Rick and Morty has been an unintentional influence on the game.
Well, it only makes sense, pop culture feeding back in, and then feeding back in the pop culture.
Well, actually, what's funny there is, so Rick and Morty, Dan Harmon is one of the main drivers of that, and he also has a show called Harmon Quest, which is a live-action thing of him and some of his comedian friends playing Pathfinder, and then it gets animated.
I saw the first one. It's very funny.
And so that was super fun for us. We actually, some of us got to go down and see at their offices a screening of some of the early episodes. And it's super fun just to see, even though, it's not, it's like it's using the Pathfinder setting or anything, but it's still just fun to see, like, oh my God, these are famous comedians using our game, to make a TV show. That's fun. That's something we never predicted, right?
Yeah, I mean that is really wild. All this, the celebrity DMs popping up. In a couple of weeks, we have Satine Phoenix coming on.
Oh yeah.
Which I'm really excited about. But it's just a strange time to live in. You're a little bit younger, but I remember, in grade school and high school, like we were gamers, but you never talked about gaming, and that was like the thing. And there was different tiers of gamers, right? There was like the really, really nerdy gamers, but then there was like this other like secret sect of gamers, which were kind of like the metalheads, right?
Yeah.
But it was like Fight Club. The first rule about gaming was you didn't talk about gaming. We'd make up like code words to talk about getting together a game. We'd call it like rocking out and stuff like that. So the other kids wouldn't know what we were talking about.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's funny how things change. But that's actually one thing I really love about this game is I've gotten to meet so many cool people that I never would have run into otherwise. And sometimes, celebrities, like, I was at a convention a few years ago where it was me and Brandon Sanderson on a panel. And, at the end of it, he's just like, I'm just so excited to be on this panel with you. I'm a big Pathfinder fan. It's like, what are you even talking? Like, you finished Wheel of Time. Like, you were very big. I'm very small. But, like, it's so fun because it's opened a lot of doors. But I think that even at a sort of a broader sense, I think that gaming now has even more of a potential to sort of bridge a lot of those social divides, right? Like, and I guess any shared hobby does, but it's cool to see when gaming like brings people together from different sort of social groups and social strata. I think that's when it's at its most powerful.
Yeah, I personally attributed a lot to video games. I think
Sure.
video games as they became more and more mainstream, and then which all video games are essentially influenced by tabletop role playing games anyway. For the most part, so it just kind of feeds back in this nice, this nice thing that all these things that were super nerdy and geeky in the past, and you would be ostracized for, are really getting to be more mainstream. One of our staff writers was talking about being in a coffee shop, gaming, and a young woman that was working there was like, "Are you guys playing D&D?" And then they're like, "Yeah," and she's like, "Oh, cool," which would have been definitely a different inflection on those words,
Sure.
10, 20 years ago, even 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's getting much more open, and that's but at the same time, I think that it's tempting to say like, oh, just like progress is happening, like it's becoming more mainstream, becoming more welcoming. But I think that it's actually doing so via very deliberate work by a bunch of people within the industry, to try and make it more inviting to people who haven't traditionally felt welcomed within the game, right? That's one of the reasons why at Paizo, with all of our stuff, but like especially, with Starfinder from the beginning, with the core rulebook, we were thinking, okay, we need to make sure that like this game needs to feel like it's not just for white dudes, right? Like we need everybody playing this game. And of course, that starts with the art, but it goes through and like you really have to shape sort of the community culture to try and say like, you know what, it's cool. Like this is not an exclusionary hobby. Everybody is welcome. And that's something that we've thought about a lot and continue to try and work on. Just to make sure that like, that we are being, that our doors are actually open and that we're being inviting for people to come play the game, regardless of, gender or sexuality or race or, any of the different demographics.
Yeah, you guys have definitely led the way with that. I mean, you can even see the influence when 5th edition was released. They're basically opening it up a lot more.
Yeah.
Games like Blue Rose, like there's there's definitely it is becoming more inviting and more welcoming.
Yeah, and I think that's not only good for us as a culture to be like bringing in everybody who was before feeling excluded, but it's also really good for just the hobby, right? You get more interesting games, you get more games, a wider audience in it, so people can make better games. I really think everybody wins.
There's definitely something to be said for seeing someone that looks like you doing the thing you want to do. Like we even started up a game that's all female players that we run once a week, just hoping that it would be more welcoming and inviting for other ladies that might watch that game and get involved. I mean, I even joked with my players, I'm like, the only thing that would make this better if we had a lady to DM this game instead of me.
Yeah. No, totally. I think that sort of thing is really in those spaces where you don't have to be the only person of your particular demographic at the table. Or even just like, I think it's really important. Our paladin in Pathfinder, our iconic paladin, is a Black woman. Like, I think that sort of speaks louder than any, public mission statement, right? It's like, sort of put your money where your mouth is. And if you show people like, this could be you, like this, whoever you are, whatever you believe or whatever your identity, like you can put on armor, you can put on that wizard hat, like you can do all of this stuff. I think it's a powerful message.
Absolutely. And, we're past our hour mark. So on that note,
yeah,
I'll wrap it up, but I really appreciate you coming out, James, and talking with us and sharing, what's coming down the pipeline with Starfinder, and delving into a little more of your personal stuff at the end with music and things like that. It's very cool. Again, we appreciate you being here. Thanks everyone who's been watching. And with that, until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.
Yeah, thanks so much.